Welcome everyone, welcome back to Inktober. This is episode 4 now. I'm very excited about this one. This one is actually one of my favorite episodes because I develop my favorite technique as I talked about in the end of last time. If you've not seen the earlier episodes, the link should be in the iCard for the previous episodes, but if you're all caught up, then let's get straight into the first drawing. We're starting off with coral, and unfortunate news, this didn't record properly. So there was an issue with space on my computer, and most of the video file corrupted. I'm lucky enough just to have this here. So I'll talk about the inspiration more than the technique, but I'll go over what techniques you see. But unfortunately, there was a lot of stuff that I tried with this that I just don't have video of, and it's been so long now that it's hard to talk about abstractly without the visual aid. So this was inspired by Shadow of the Colossus. I was rewatching Jacksepticeye's Shadow of the Colossus series, and I was thinking about this prompt, coral, and I thought it'd be really cool to have like a full-on humanoid underwater colossus, because the only underwater ones that you have, the only water-related ones, is one that is actually underwater, and the other one which just flies over the water. And I think it'd be cool to have like a humanoid one that somehow works underwater. At least like from an artistic point of view. I doubt it would work at all in a gameplay point of view. Everything on this is coral. This is one that not many people really saw the coral with, but actually coral comes in so many different forms. It doesn't seem like some things you just don't think of as coral, because I think a lot of people think of just tube coral or fan coral, but then there's also like rain coral and all sorts of weird stuff. It comes in like all sorts of colors and all sorts of shapes. So a little bit of technique with this. I used mainly the mixer brush. So I first of all, just as you saw there, just masked in a bunch of color. And then I used the mixer brush, and I didn't even have like transparency lock on. I was fine with just going outside the lines because I was all shaping it. At this point I'm still using the mixer brush, but I use it a bit less because there are actually limitations that I found with this. You do end up with quite brush strokey stuff because it's not quite the point of it, but that is a very popular style with it, and I don't always want that. So right now I'm working on using the mixer brush in tandem with the regular brush. It is very fun to use though, and I think it's quite an underused thing. It's not really resource intensive, as you might imagine. It's much nicer to your computer than the smudge tool, despite the fact that they essentially do the same thing. There are a lot of techniques that I used with that you don't see, but I applied like a wave effect on it, and also kind of did some stuff with transparency, having the original over it. There's a lot of like layering the same thing over itself with different opacities and different effects. Okay, Hollow Knight fan art part 2 for Inktober here. So if you remember, over in episode 1, day 2, I tried to do Wisp, and Wisp just was a bit of a tangent, but I was desperate to do Hollow Knight art, but it was weird and didn't particularly fit. This time I'm trying just direct Hollow Knight fan art with sleep, which actually works way better with the prompt. Putting in some text there and doing this text box. This was probably the hardest part of it actually, this text box. For one thing, I had like these things to do, but harder than that was just finding the prompt for the text. The Hollow Knight uses two main fonts, one for its titles and one for its dialogue. The dialogue has lowercase, the titles do not, so they're different fonts. Titles is Trishan Pro, but lowercase is very hard to find, and in fact I didn't actually find the official font, but through many hours, I don't know, not necessarily hours, but at least an hour of searching on the internet, I found this very close approximation to it, which I think is called Minion or something. So here I have the most stupid part of this time lapse, which is where I forgot to do a sketch. Seriously, the whole time I was like, why is this so difficult to draw? Why can't I draw today? It's like, oh yeah, because I forgot to do a sketch. So when I do the second character here, I actually remember to do a sketch. There he is. There's Quirrell. But, God, in a way, I mean, it's quite impressive. Like, look, that's without a sketch. At the same time, I'm an idiot. Quirrell's got quite a difficult body to get right because you gotta get that dad bod in. I accidentally gave him a bit too much chest here. I'm gonna remove that in a sec. There we go. But, like, I didn't notice the dad bod when I originally played it, and so I just imagined him like a regular warrior. But no, he has like a full-on dad bod. So here I'm giving it a bit of a spotlight effect on the ground. This isn't particularly based off of any actual kind of death moment in the games, but yeah, it was sort of just general idea. Actually, in hindsight, I would have actually done some dream particles around it. You know, those dream catcher looking particles around it. I would have done that, but I didn't. My bad. I still think it works the way it is. There's not a lot to talk about here. This is just really adjusting the spotlight stuff. This part confused the hell out of me when I watched this back because it's been a little while since I did this picture, and I don't know what I was trying to do here, but I guess I did it. I think I was trying to use layer mask stuff, and I didn't get how it worked. I don't know what I tried to do, but it worked in the end, I guess. I now understand this stuff better, I think. There you go. Little warrior, please wake up. I like this drawing. It was one of my favorites, I would say. Favorites from the month? I mean, either I don't particularly like the drawing, or it's one of my favorites from the month. That's how the scaling works. Oh, Remy, my best picture, my magnum opus. It is like a fine wine. We'll take a sip. But if you're like me, you have the whole bottle. Ah, Remy, a beautiful rat. He's saying hello. He got you a flower. Why don't you go over, shake his hand? He worked hard to get those flowers. Very hard. Do you know how hard it is to get flowers as a rat? It's surprisingly, or perhaps not surprisingly, very difficult. Go on. Thank him for the flowers. Show him you care. You do care, right? I hope you do. Go on. Give Remy a hug. Surely a rat such as him deserves a hug. It's very hard to be a rat. Have you ever tried being a rat? I doubt it. A rat and a chef. Oh, you must appreciate that at least. Congratulate him. Say well done, Remy. Go on. Say well done. You care, don't you? I hope you care. If you do not care, then perhaps you should say sorry. Apologize to Remy immediately. Remy worked hard for you. Remy worked hard for his country and for you and everyone he loves. Do you not care about Remy? Do you not care about him and his beautiful eyes? Please, say sorry to Remy. If you do not, I cannot help you. Please, say sorry. He's a very reasonable rat. He's a very reasonable rat. If you apologize now, he will absolutely understand. Say sorry to Remy. Say sorry, please. He worked so hard. Go on. Tell him you're sorry. No. Show him. You're sorry. Give him a hug at least. Or maybe, just maybe, you could give him an ever so slight, teeny weeny, insignificant little kiss. Go on, give him a kiss. It doesn't mean anything. It's normal just to say thank you. Thank you, Remy. And to say that you're sorry, for you did offend him after all. Give him a kiss. A peck on the cheek, perhaps, or even a peck on the mouth. Maybe just a little one. It's very friendly. It's very pleasant. Give him one tiny, meaningless, insignificant, passionate kiss. I'm gonna be honest, RIP didn't turn out exactly the way I wanted it to. I didn't particularly want to do something gruesome or horrific that day, so I tried this, which was like a rip in space or whatever, and then I thought of maybe ripping a phone book as a strongman, because I did not want to do something gruesome or dark. I just wanted to do something pleasant, but it just wouldn't come, so I tried this instead, and this is what I went with in the end. It's sort of amnesia-like an amnesia boss or whatever. No, they don't have bosses in Amnesia, they just have monsters that try and kill you, and probably do. I think the quality of the drawing is okay, but my heart really wasn't in it at all. I did try my best to stick to it, but it was hard. It was hard to stick with it. It is something that I'm trying to work on as well, doing things that I don't exactly want to do, because I plan to make a career out of this. But yeah, fortunately, this one just didn't work. That's it, everyone. This is the one. This is Dig. This is the one where I actually use that technique I keep on talking about. It's very exciting, but I don't actually use the technique until about halfway through this thing. So let's first of all just talk about what the drawing is and this sketching phase here. So as you can see, I'm drawing Iron Man, but not just any Iron Man suit. I'm doing the Iron Man suit that you see in Iron Man 3, which is the digging one. It kind of has arms like jackhammers. You don't actually see it being used to dig anything, but you do use it to dig in the Lego Avengers game, so I'm going to count that as canon. As you can see here, I'm just sort of roughing in the sketch. So this body position here, that's mine, but all of the lighting stuff is with heavy reference to a picture that I have on another monitor. I'm still getting used to doing metallic lighting because it's very difficult, it's very difficult, especially brushed metallic. Doing reflections is hard enough, but then I struggle with doing like brushed metal and stuff, like what to do with that and how much to really think about it, because sometimes I feel I overthink it. Doing this line art stuff here, I wasn't actually intending to do line art. I'm actually just trying to block in the dark areas so that I can then soften it out, which is why I'm using the mixer brush at 50% mix. I have to duck down just to see the top of my monitor there. I've got it at 50% mix so that it kind of partially blends in with this, with the brown mask that I've got in there. However, I actually use it in a slightly different way. I started to sort of do my own thing with it, and I started to do quite similar to that kind of Naturix style that I talked about in my Drawing Like Naturix video, where each stage does become kind of a shaping phase. So as you can see, I'm sort of going through, I'm erasing, I'm shaping, I'm mixing and blending to get that shape that I want. In a bit I will actually go all the way around it and just use the eraser tool to get rid of a bunch of the color that I don't want. This is actually, I find it a really interesting and natural. It's not quick, but it is a very natural way of drawing for me. I like doing stuff on one layer at this point. I used to not. I've talked about that before. I used to not like doing stuff on one layer. I used to like to have backups and backups and backups of every layer and stuff. One thing, it would make all of my documents like way too big than necessary. Nothing would be labeled, of course, so it was massively confusing for me. Whereas now, just doing everything kind of on one layer, not necessarily everything, but a lot of stuff on one layer, is actually really nice. What I'm doing here, this is like the first introduction to the technique, is where I'm using an overlay layer style. What that means is that I can just put in this bright color over the top of the dark color I have beneath. Now, I don't actually recommend you do this part. This is not actually the main part of the technique, but I kind of got used to doing this, which helped with the actual technique. So the technique relies on understanding this kind of basic principle of how some of these layer styles work. For overlay, soft light, and hard light, and I believe also, I think it's vivid light that it also works with, the closer you get to exactly 50% grey, or grey 128, the more transparent the colour will appear. Now that might sound a bit complicated, so what I recommend you do is you search GIMP layer styles, and that gives you actually a really good page made by the guys that made GIMP, which is like a free alternative to Photoshop. And it gives you some really good information, which I'm trying to use here to work out this 128 grey thing. It is a bit mathsy, but for me that's not really a turn off. In fact, that's exactly what I wanted, so I was very grateful for that. But yeah, just remember that if it's 128 grey or grey 50%, it will appear transparent with those blending layers, which means you can do this. This is the main technique here. So you place down, completely fill in the layer or the canvas with 128 grey, and then you set that to hard light, overlay, or soft light, or vivid light. If you like vivid light, it's always a little bit weird. And then you can set that to that, and so that will appear transparent. And what that allows you to do is you can use the mixer brush, because the mixer brush will blend in any color you lay down, or blend it in with that gray, but that gray is transparent, so essentially you're blending it in with nothing, and you can do these really nice effects that you can kind of see me do here. It is a bit complicated and it's a bit hard to explain even with this time-lapse, so I am intending to make actually a full video on it. I might even make kind of a series of drawing tips with it, because there was some other stuff that I've thought of, but I don't know exactly what it will consist of yet. I make no promises. But as you can see, it's really useful. I particularly like hard light, because hard light actually splits itself into two things. So for anything below 50% grey, so for the darker stuff, it basically acts like a multiply layer, which is a very popular layer style for people doing shading. I use it a lot myself. I used it earlier in the video, if you remember, when I did the sleep drawing. But then for the stuff above 50% grey, or for the lighter stuff, it functions more like a lighting layer style, which you might use. I can't really think of what exactly it would work as. It's not screen necessarily, it sort of does its own thing, but it explains this better in the GIMP documentation that I talked about before. Here I'm trying to get some dust effects in the foreground, which was interesting and quite difficult to do, messing around with some more blending layers, but it's sort of odd because once you get used to being able to use blending layers, you end up like not being able to stop. I tried to add some motion blur effect to that like jackhammer part. I think I actually end up scrapping that. You know, I'm just getting a very rough background in here because I didn't particularly have much time left, and to be honest, having a detailed background really wasn't important for this. This focus is on Iron Man in the foreground. So I'm getting some fog-like kind of things back there, just to sort of make that rim lighting that I have make sense. I have to say, I think it works really well. I'm tremendously happy with this picture. I absolutely love it. I am so happy with this technique, and I'm so glad I can finally share it with you. This is one of my favorites, if not my favorite out of this month. Definitely my favorite so far. But I do think there's actually some really good stuff in episode 5, which sounds really clickbaity, but I swear, there is actually some really good stuff. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Inktober. It's very exciting now because next episode is episode 5, which is the penultimate episode. Then we got episode 6, which is the finale, and I do intend to do some really cool stuff for the finale. I've got some great stuff planned, and I know that I've fallen off the horse a little bit with these videos, but they are coming back, and I'm hoping to get them out weekly again, kind of like what I had before. Actually more like a week and a halfly before, but I aim for weekly and then end up being kind of weekly. So thank you again. Thank you for sticking with it, and as I suppose is now my outro. Goodbye, folks.